Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. Happy Monday. It is August 16th, 2021, and this is the Daily Medicine Transmission. Hope everybody had a great weekend. If in fact the weekend is a weekend for you, I know that that's not always the case, being in the service industry for a very long time, and in social work too, not always the same weekend as everybody else has. So whatever was going on for you, I hope that it was good and that you feel refreshed, rejuvenated, and at peace with yourself. So today is Venus has moved into Libra today, so that's the big news for today. So welcome back if you're a regular subscriber. Welcome if you're new to the channel. It's so great to have you here. The subscriber counts just keep going up, and that's so great. And if you really do value and appreciate this content, just like with any other independent content creator, you can support their work and this channel by subscribing, liking, commenting, sharing the content. That all actually does have an impact on this message spreading to a wider audience, being suggested in the feed. Hello, Kitty. Angus is coming to say hi today, which is very outside of his normal character, to be so snuggly. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to Monday. So like I said, Venus is in fact in Libra now. So there is all kinds of information, astrological configurations that go along with that. And people, bringing it to a balance, fairness, justice, all of the things that Libra represents. But from an esoteric perspective, Libra is in fact the form of balance, the form of justice and fairness, and the form of perfect balance. And so as Venus is now moved into one of the signs of her rulership, she's now moving towards the masculine expression of herself or themselves as an archetype. And I've been really very strongly, this has been coming through now with myself and some other clients as well. And I actually wrote about this on somebody else's Facebook post not that long ago, that as much as Mercury has this non-binary type of thing going on with Gemini and Virgo, right? Masculine and feminine within the realm of ideas, right? Because Gemini is, in fact, the polarity. Libra is the same way. Libra is the scales, right? It represents that there are, in fact, two poles in a material reality that do need to be adjusted in order to find balance. And the scales can refer to lots of different types of resources, even as ourselves, as a conditioned, purified, disciplined being that is showing up in service to our relationships, whatever they are. Now that Venus has moved into her other sign of co-rulership, she is moving towards more of a masculine presentation. Now, let me explain something first, which is that Venus is Lady Justice, right? Venus is the one holding the scales and using her sensitivity, right? Justice is blind. So there's no possibility of being impacted or influenced by what we see with just our visual senses, because sometimes that can be an illusion, right? Sometimes that can be sometimes that can throw us off. Sometimes that is not accurate to what actually is happening. So Venus as an archetype, as a symbolic reference, showing that the sensitivity that she has while in Taurus can now be applied to her ability to actually feel, be sensitive to the discrepancies or the imbalance. And our responsibility in this moment is to transfigure ourselves, what we have to offer, in order to then reconstruct and find balance, right? This is all about finding the balance in the scales. And so there's a lot of focus right now with Venus coming into this position, especially with Libra representing the form of balance and fairness and justice, right? So things about legal contracts coming up, being supported, things around the justice system and legal aspects coming into our awareness and being balanced out. But remember that Venus is holding the space. She's literally holding the scales of justice and using her sensitivity to determine where things are off balance. Again, because it can be deceiving to only use one of those senses. And it's important that for all of us and our discernment that we're able to start looking into our ability to use other senses to determine what is balanced and fair. This is why the energetic hygiene and the energetic practices, however you do them, is so essential right now, especially because it will allow us to check our gut and to use that inner sensitivity to determine if things are balanced or not. Again, it can be very deceptive in our visual representation. It may look balanced, right? We may being told that it's balanced, but it's our sensitivity energetically that is going to give us insight into what is truly balanced and fair and just. And so Venus in this more masculine presentation in Libra, cardinal air, right? Air being a masculine element. Cardinal, meaning that there's momentum, that there is an application of this energy, our application of our knowledge of balance that we discovered through Virgo, right? Going through all of that process. And this is the time that is consecrated to the seed. This is what it's all been for. The seed that continues the cycle of life, that brings about the beginning and end of the cycle. And it continues on and on, just like everything else in our material universe. It is a system of cycles. So, the cats are they're very vocal right now. So, Prometheus, that's what I'm getting at, is that the masculine expression of Venus is Prometheus, at least in my read at this point. Prometheus, the giver of fire to humanity. Prometheus, who was punished by the rest of the gods. Prometheus as a titan, right? Gives fire to humanity. Prometheus is known to be from Venus, right? Gives fire to humanity, gives light to humanity, and is in the process punished as a result of it, forever to be chained to a rock and having the eagle Aquila eat out its liver every day, until Chiron comes along and takes his place, right? Chiron, the wounded healer. Chiron, that the centaur that eventually gives up the very essence that made him such an incredible healer, which was in his immortality, gave it up, took the place of Prometheus so that he could step into mortality and be able to die, to release himself from his own pain that was inconsolable or unhealable, even though he was able to utilize all of his skills and talents and his natural ability with his identity as an immortal, magical being to heal other people. So, but it wasn't enough to heal himself. And so he had to give up that identity as a victim, as a savior, in order to finally heal and be released from his own wounds and his own pain. So it's something to keep in mind too about the giving over, right? The sacrificing and surrendering of a part of ourselves that's really doing nothing but perpetuating a wound. When we give this over, it releases that part of ourselves, that archetypal representation of some aspect that's coming forward and providing the balance, right? That was the whole point, to give humanity an edge, a leg up, by giving us access to fire, to light. And you can certainly start to expand this concept and expand this perspective into the morning star, the light bringer, the fallen angels. All of that symbolism is still very relevant. And whether or not you want to identify with these in terms of a spiritual practice, that's on you. What I'm suggesting here is that there is a giving over of something when we decide to commit ourselves to the form of balance. And we learn how to do that with Virgo. So we have all this energy still in Virgo, right? We still have Mercury, the ruler of Virgo, is now there. We have Mars in Virgo. Remember, the sun is going to come into Virgo very, very soon, right after the full moon. Right after it, right? The full moon is on the 22nd. When right after the full moon, the sun's going to move into Virgo. Virgo, and this is going to be a big part of how we identify ourselves, express ourselves. It's going to be right out there shining forward, this Virgo energy. So it's a blessing that we're getting all of this opportunity and all these different personal planets to connect to this right now. And then Venus moving into her home territory of Libra, being the balancer, right? Being the agent of balance, using the sensitivity of the natural world and the energy that is inherent within it, which is sacred, right? This understanding and this ability to hold this and the reconstitution and reconstruction and transfiguration of who we are in order to create the form of balance. So there's a lot to talk about astrologically. Of course, you can always check out the weekly astrology report that also is posted on YouTube and BitChute, and covers the week leading up to this full moon. So there, I'm going to do my best to be present and offer these transmissions. I'm going on vacation starting on tomorrow, going on personal retreat, and I won't be back until after the full moon. So I'm going to do my best to stay present and to be transmitting as things come through, but I can't make any promises because I am on personal retreat, and I do expend quite a bit of personal energy putting these transmissions together. All of the information, the astrology, it all takes a lot of work and time. Again, so if you want to support what I'm doing, you can support the content. You can go to my website and see if there are any services that are available to be offered, or you can support me on Subscribestar. That's going to be becoming a lot more relevant very soon. So let's get into the reading today and see what kind of threshold we are in fact crossing today, as now Venus, the goddess of love, right? The Promethean type of energy is now moving into its home sign of Libra, the application of our knowledge in order to find balance, right? It's time now to actually start putting what we're learning about ourselves and what we are doing to bring ourselves to a place where we are, like I said, disciplined, refined, right? That has to do with Virgo as well. The perfectionism that can really get us, that can really, distract us in a lot of ways, right? We can get caught in that loop of perfectionism with Virgo, right? That meticulousness and that attention to detail, to the point where we never do actually allow ourselves to give what we have grown this whole time. When a seed or when a plant gets to this point and grows the fruit, it eventually drops the fruit. It doesn't hold on to it forever. It drops the fruit. It's an offering, right? And this is what Venus in Libra is now asking us, is to make the offering of everything that we have worked on within ourselves when it comes to beauty and harmony and the sensitivity to the world around us. Okay, so let's look at the reading for today and see what is in store for us in terms of an intuitive message. Where are we? Here's our reading right now, and then we are going to, where are we at here? Yes, that's what I want. I want to be able to do this. So a lot of major arcana cards here in this horizontal axis, right? We have the lust card, or the 11, right? Leo. We had our first quarter square on yesterday, our Leo sun in a square to Scorpio moon. How was that Scorpio moon for everyone? Many of us had pre-waved it, so by the time we got there, it seemed like we were just kind of like just floating in the stillness. And maybe sinking a little bit into the murkier depths, of course. And I talked a lot about this in the astrology report on Friday, how the moon in Scorpio does pose a challenge because the moon in our own inner emotional landscape does want to be held, contained, to have some sort of protective barrier that is expressed through our familial bonds and that lattice work of emotional relationships that holds us. Either it's our family, either it's our spiritual community, it can be a number of things. So that square that we experienced yesterday, about our ability to really shine and to be fully expressing ourselves creatively, letting the passion move through us to show our skill set and our perseverance to develop that skill set, in square to the Scorpio moon. That was a real reminder, and a very potent opportunity to connect emotionally and intuitively and deep into the realm of the power that is inherent in the Scorpio archetype, right? The power that is inherent in relationships, any kind of relationships. When we cooperate, when we commune with each other in any type of way, there is a resource created, and that is power. And so there's on the one hand, we express this power and creativity through us as individuals shining forward to the fullness of who we are, right? That Leo energy, the sovereign, regal self that is in full expression. The square and the fixed square, right? You have fixed fire, and then Scorpio's fixed water. The square there was an opportunity to take those drives, those animal drives. We see this here with the lust. Let's just look at it. The lust, the animal nature that is underneath everything that we do, that we bring into form, that we create, all of that energy under the surface that is meant to be harnessed rather than either repressed or just allowed to, run rampant. It's the strength, right? The actual strength or power in the traditional tarot, the Rider-Waite. Number 11, right? Here's that master number of 11. We as the master within ourselves is expressed through this Leo energy. But the square that we really experienced, I feel like, brought to our awareness, and especially with some friction, it's one thing to express this energy within us, right? This is an individual experience. It's another to feel the how we can metamorphosize, if that's even a word, how we can metamorphosize and shift and change these base animal drives that we feel, that in and of themselves aren't base, right? They aren't negative or positive. They are just what they are, right? This is just the energy, the kundalini that moves through us. How do we take that energy and transmute it, right? Transubstantiate it even, right, into something that is a way higher vibration. This square was a really, really potent opportunity to come to an awareness about that within ourselves. And I actually posted about this today with the Reiki attunements and the days of the 13, 14, and 15 day kind of all put together for the weekend, and really what it brought out in me as well. So this is where the square came from. And so we see this as our causal factor, all of this energy, the lust energy, the fire within us, the kundalini, the coiled serpent that gets released and moves through us. You can even see that pictured in this card. All of the serpents at the top as this female figure is pushing this throbbing seed up through the soil, and she's riding the beast, right? She's riding the beast, she's harnessing the beast of many heads, right? She is in a symbiotic relationship, right? This is our higher self, this feminine quality actually that is able to harness this and take it, not repress it, like I said, but also not allow it to just be in control, because this is how we get ourselves into trouble, right? And I've talked about this many times with the Leo energy, that without it being the expression of source, right? A divine expression that is moving through us based on our passion, then it is in fact, an ego-based type of energy, using that kundalini as a way to, or being used against us. That also happened a lot with the Lion's Gate too. Make no mistake that Lion's Gate was absolutely attempted to be hijacked. And I think a lot of people actually were hijacked through that Lionsgate because they did not do the work within themselves to keep from, this activation kind of driving them insane, right? Or activating some part of this animal nature part of themselves, and they don't even realize what they're doing. They're just acting out. So this is this causal factor, all this energy, right? And it really depends how we've been utilizing it, how we've been acknowledging it and expressing it. Because now that we're in this moment here, this present moment, right? The heart of the matter, which is this axis point between what is going on energetically within us and what is manifesting outside of us in our awareness. So the heart here, number 10. So we're kind of like seemingly moving backwards. We went from the 11 to the 10. Both of these are fire, right? The lust or the Leo card is fire, and here we are. Jupiter, right? The ruler of Sagittarius. Where's our moon right now? Well, it's in Sagittarius. So the Wheel of Fortune. Jupiter, right? Jupiter is the defender of our collective values, but the wheel always is turning, isn't it? This is really about the masters of karma. So there's a couple of those, right? Saturn is a master of karma. Uranus is a master of karma. Neptune is a master of karma. Even Pluto in some ways, right? All of these outer planets that are, by the way, all retrograde, are interacting or in some sort of influence with the karmic expression. And so everything is in motion. There's no stagnation that is natural in our material universe. Everything is always in motion, even down to the atomic and subatomic level. It's always in motion. And, a vibration does show a motion, right? It's a cresting of a wave function. So even down to the subatomic quantum level, it's all still in motion. So fate, when we talk about the Wheel of Fortune, right, we don't know where the wheel's going to start and stop, right? When it's spun, we don't know where it's going to end. We just know that we're on it. And so fate is not that we don't, it's not so much that we don't have any kind of control over what happens to us and that we are completely, powerless to do anything, and it's all written out before us by somebody else. It's just us, right? And so fate is the result of what we've already done, just like this cause and effect relationship. There are things we don't control, right? The turning of the wheel, for instance, that's not something that we each control, because Jupiter, as the representative of our collective belief system and paradigm, and honestly is kind of in charge of all of that, is in a leadership position, is the one spinning the wheel. And we have to realize some facts here, right? That we have to see that fate is the result of where we've been, what and how we respond to what is happening in the moment, right? And it's all about how we deal with the results, and that will continue to create this experience of quote unquote fate, right? Every time we respond or react to a situation, how we deal with the results of a situation then sets us up for another cycle. And so this is why it's so important that we become conscious co-creators, that we are aware that our resonance actually makes a difference. And so when the wheel does turn and things happen that we don't personally have any control over, which happens all the time, we realize that what we've done prior in reference to what is happening in the moment that we have no control over will determine what our future outcome is. And that is all that fate really is. So we do see that there may be some unexpected changes, that the wheel is now turning with Venus coming into Libra. Of course, we are now seeing that things are going to start focusing on being balanced and the form is meant to be balanced. And so we also, so we can also, wrap that into this whole process, that in order to find balance, sometimes, you turn the wheel and you have to reconfigure yourself. But everything that we have done up to this point will lead to the outcome that we get. And the awareness of that and the acceptance of that is really going to lead to our empowerment more than just waiting to see what happens and then feeling like a victim based on where the wheel stops. But But here at the center, we do feel the wheel is turning. It's always turning. It's never not turning. Just like we are never not revolving around the sun. We're never not revolving around the center of the galaxy. The galaxy is never not like expanding with the universe, you know? So there is a constant turning of the wheel. But where we have been, especially with this lust card, what is it that we are directing our energy to, right? This individual, passionate, expressive energy, right? Our voice, right? And the resonance of our voice. Where is it being directed to? Because that's going to have a direct impact ultimately on the nature of this effect, which again is the magician, right? The manifestation principle. Thoughts coming, thoughts turning into things, right? This is how we manifest our reality. And we have the potential to, this card has come up quite a bit, right? And so it's really showing us that it's all in our hands right now. And yes, there are things that we can't control. This is what we are looking at right now. We can't control certain things that are outside of our immediate control, right? But how we've been and what's been leading up to this point and our response to the results is more impactful than we can imagine. So when we look at where we're at energetically, Seven of Forces, here's our balance again, right? This is under the surface. This is in our subconscious. It's all about what's happening in the subconscious. By the time it gets to your conscious awareness, it is already embedded as an energetic template in your subconscious, either a program that somebody has installed themselves, and that comes through, lifetimes, that comes through just this lifetime of education, indoctrination, all the different media outlets and what they provide and reinforcement over and over and over. This is how your subconscious is programmed, and it's very insidious, and we have the possibility and the capability of doing this for ourselves. This is what it means to be a conscious co-creator. So with the Seven of Forces and balance, we literally see the scales of justice on the desk here. So there is, this is a time of harmony and balance and justice, right? We have to actually embody this in our subconscious, right? In our energetic field at the root here. We have to embody this and accept this and believe this, right? And so all systems seek to achieve balance. This is the nature of our universe, and this is what duality allows for. If there's no duality, there's no two sides of the scale. And so in this material universe, balance is always sought, right? It's the nature of things. And so we're always going to look for balance, even in the midst of chaos. And so legal action, for instance, can come into focus with Venus and Libra. That's a pretty strong message that's coming through a lot of different astrological outlets. But you have to remember that justice and reciprocity are energetic experiences, right? They start in the energy body, which is here at the subconscious. So if we want to see this energy of balance and the Seven of Forces, we have to be actually embodying this within ourselves. So energy production is up to the individual, right? Each of us. And it's up to us also to invest that energy production with the intention of some sort of return. And it's the same thing. If we put something on this scale, there will be an equal and opposite reaction on the other side of it. So again, that 7 is the divine number, right? It is divine intervention. It is the sacred. It's just, 7 represents that next step, the day, right? The 7th day of rest, the fall from grace that allows for divine intervention, the squaring of the circle, the thing that doesn't seem to fit or make sense is really how we actually alchemize and adjust ourselves to create something new. So inner balance and being aware of our thoughts and actions is a really big part of this card and where it's situated today. We have to achieve this balance within ourselves, right? And realize that justice and reciprocity are in fact energetic. And as we are embodying this in our root, in our subconscious, the place where we actually create the emotional energy in order to manifest from a magician standpoint, and we move up through the course of what's here at the heart, which is a shift. It's a turning of the wheel. It's something that is about to change. It might be unexpected change. It might be kind of expected change if you're a person that can read the energetic construct of the timeline. Either way, the wheel is still turning. And speaking of having intuition, where we can put our focus and our energetic our conscious awareness here, the Oracle of Delphi. Now notice this is also number 1, right? So we have a number 1 here, we have a number 1 here, we have an 11 right here. That's interesting. Oh, we have a 1 of keys up here too. That's very fascinating. There is a lot of renewal energy that is going to come as a result of this wheel turning. Even the Wheel of Fortune is 10. That's 1 plus 0. Okay, so there is a distinct crossing of a threshold right now into a completely new territory as a result of this turning of the wheel. Okay, and so the conscious awareness here that is represented by the Oracle of Delphi. Now this represents something very specific, right? Of course, number 1, so we're looking at the essence of the beginning, right? The first step after the full. So the priestess at the Oracle of Delphi is receiving perceptions from what? Apollo, the sun god. Okay, so remember, Leo is ruled by the sun, right? The sun that is a nuclear furnace, the sun who unconditionally and devotionally gives of itself and provides the energy for all life, at least on this planet. All energy in this solar system is coming, for the most part, there's cosmic radiation and stuff like that from deep space, but the sun is what is providing the energy to this solar system. So there is, where these messages are coming from are Apollo, the sun god, the light, right? Now, there's 2 points to this, though. It's not just the priestess as the oracle. She has the priest here who is interpreting what she is perceiving during her experience. So there are 2 pieces to psychic experience right here. You may get images or feelings without knowing how to interpret them, and that means you have to practice. That takes time. That takes, there are lots of different ways that you can do this, and there are no doubt numerous courses and things you can find online that are practices, techniques that are going to help you be able to interpret what comes through, because you have to also keep in mind that this individual, his consciousness is actually changing because of the steam coming out of this fissure. It probably has some sort of mineral content that does actually shift your consciousness. If you've ever been to a natural hot spring, especially one that has high amounts of lithium, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because your entire consciousness changes as you take in these minerals in higher doses than you usually would. And lithium is one of those. It's a mood stabilizer. And so if you've ever been to Brighton Bush Hot Springs, for instance, they have a sauna, a steam sauna that they've built over a natural lithium pool. And so you go in there and you sweat for a while and you come out and you're just floating away, right? Because lithium is very powerful as a mood stabilizer. And when your mood is stabilized, you can feel high, right? You can feel uplifted. And so the oracle is, her consciousness is changing as, because of the position she puts herself in. It's up to the priest, right? The masculine aspect, right? The interpreter to actually interpret and write down what the priestess is saying. So there's these 2 points, right? It's so interesting that there's also this sense of Libra right now. There are 2 points. There's intuition and perception, and then the interpretation. Again, the balance here is that we have to be able to balance these 2 aspects within ourselves, don't we? We need to be able to take in the information and interpret it correctly, right? And make sure that our own ego is not getting in the way, making sure that our fear and our righteous indignation, right? There's so many different things that the ego structure will place in the way as a filter, right? And then you get these images or perceptions that come through. And then, but they're coming through a filter that we interpret them in a certain way. And there are lots of ways that this is curated for us that we don't really realize. And we're coming to realize slowly but surely that what comes through is coming through a filter that is being curated and is certainly being manipulated for somebody else's benefit, right? If we truly believe that what's coming through is a certain perspective, if it represents a certain timeline trajectory, any of these things, people channeling, people doing psychic readings, this is why it's really important to understand where you end and this other space begins, because it's very easy to project your own filters into this situation. So it's important to practice. And what this is really saying here is that our conscious attention can really be focused on the balancing of the perception and the interpretation. And this is only going to come when we, in fact, are balanced at the root of who we are. And we understand that justice and reciprocity and this form of balance is something that is in fact energetic. And if we can acknowledge that and hold that, right, and allow that to root us, then as we face the inevitable turning of the wheel, we can put our awareness and practice and our attention on making sure that our perception and our interpretation are in fact balanced, right? And that it's a correct interpretation of what we're perceiving as opposed to somebody else's version of it. And that's always a possibility. And when we are taking in messages from the sun, right, here is our Leo energy. So again, it's really important that we realize that the shining forward that Leo represents, especially because the sun is still here, the sun is still in Leo, that we are taking in the messages from this place and interpreting them correctly. Because once the sun moves into Virgo, then it is time to take those messages and apply that to the purification, the discipline, the path of discipleship, energetic hygiene, organizing ourselves, and being very patient with what is growing, right? So we want to make sure that we know exactly what messages we're getting from this part of ourselves, the lust, right? And if it is going through a dark filter, if it's going through a filter of fear, if it's going through a filter of lack, then that's what we're going to interpret it as, especially when the wheel turns and we don't have any control over that. But this is really a very powerful reading, because what it is showing us is that we have the capacity to step into our power as a conscious manifester, as a magician, making an idea come true, regardless of what the idea is. Again, this is why it's important that we're focusing on the two poles of psychic awareness, which is perception and interpretation. Emotional and creative energies need a physical basis. And in fact, they will find a physical basis. We don't have to actually consciously consider that. It'll just happen. And this is why people get stuck in these feedback loops of not feeling like they have no control over their lives, or that they're a victim, is because no matter what, this emotional and creative energy will find a physical basis regardless. And so when we step into our power and responsibility of this, it changes everything. There's no victimhood anymore, right? Now, things happen that you can't control, right? And really terrible things happen that you can't control. Believe me, I could speak all day about this in my own personal life. Everybody can. Everybody has those things in their lives that they had no control and somebody took their power away. It's our ability as conscious co-creators, though, to take that situation, take the energy that is associated with it, and use that to manifest our ideal. And so there's self-realization that comes with this outcome. There's a strong will, and it really is showing us that we, in fact, are going to make ideas come true. And it has a lot to do with the way that we are interpreting the raw energy coming through us through the sun in Leo. And it's essential that we are balanced, that we understand what that means at the root of us, that we understand that justice and reciprocity are energetic, right? It's not going to come from outside of us and then we'll feel like it's fair. We have to find it, cultivate it within us, and then be willing to interpret what is coming through accurately, so that when we do bring emotional and creative energies into a physical form, it's exactly what we intended, and that we're fully aware of what we're doing. So the guidance here is really about being being a power, being connected to the power of nature, right? Of the having this presence as the king of forces, right? This is an individual who is completely in his power just by being connected to the natural world, right? He's surrounded by these animals. He is next to this water. He's got this beautiful, indigo nebula above him. So there is this indigo energy that's embedded in this whole archetype right here. We have to honor ourselves. We have to bring this presence to our awareness as this individual, right? And so it could certainly express itself as an actual person in our lives, but this seems to be more about bringing this in to ground us and root us. Maybe just intending to bring this energy or somebody that has this energy into our awareness, into our subconscious awareness. But this feels very much like we want to embody this, right? We want to be a powerful and positive energy as a result of just being connected to the natural world and how powerful that is, right? And then when we have the spider, there is this sense here that, this says trust the creative spark you're feeling and express it through writing stories. And remember, writing stories and mythology, this is a narrative, right? Are you writing your own narrative? Are you responsible for weaving the reality that you rely upon to sustain you and to shelter you? Weave the web of your reality through the idea that you are balanced, through the experience of being balanced at a very root level. The spider is very feminine. It's very creative. There's receptivity here. It is medicine. When the spider shows itself, it is medicine. And sometimes it's potent medicine, kind of like homeopathy, right? You get bit by a spider and there's poison in there. And with Antares still in the picture right now, I know this isn't a scorpion necessarily, but the same kind of basic concept that the poison sometimes can act as a medicine in its own right. But this is really signaling to us that we're responsible. We're responsible for creating our own reality, weaving our own web, right? Not being trapped in somebody else's web and being a meal for them. That's absolutely a possibility. And when we embody our, the king of forces within us, then we are completely at home, right? In the natural world, we feel sustained, we feel powerful, we feel positive. We know that everything we need is right here and accessible. And it's the same thing when it comes to balance, right? Everything we need to find balance and justice is within us because it's an energetic experience. So the spider is here as medicine and as a reminder that we are here to weave our own reality. And we have to be balanced. And the web has to be balanced, right? It's completely balanced in its own way and very strong, but at the same time, there doesn't seem to be much to it. So, and the spider comes up quite a bit because it's reminding us how important this is. Now, the ladybug here is about abundance, right? And again, Oracle of Delphi, perception and interpretation. If we're knowing that our thoughts are manifesting more quickly. That's a pretty obvious thing, that manifestation is happening very quickly now. And we need to start collectively taking responsibility for this so that we can get to the revival that we are wanting to be at, right? With humanity being free, right, on this planet, and making the leap into the next step of our evolution. And so we do know that our thoughts are manifesting more quickly. This is part of the speed up. This is part of the resonance that keeps going up and up and up and up, right? But gratitude here. Gratitude is key to receiving. You have to be open and you have to live in a resonance that as if it already exists, right? Ask for what you want, then imagine that you already have it. What does that feel like? Well, hold on to that feeling and utilize that feeling, because that feeling is here, down at the bottom, right? The feeling is what the King of Forces is tapped into. It's a stream of gratitude that really leads to abundance. And so we have to be open and willing to receive it. We also have to be willing to interpret it as such. If we continue to keep looking at the lack, right? Things are not fair. Things are not balanced. There is no justice, right? If we keep repeating this over and over, or if we keep reinforcing it because we don't see it outside of us yet, because we're not looking at the very big picture of all of this, then yeah, we're not going to be open to receive. So we need to be open to receive the messages, the perceptions, and then realize that our interpretation is part of our job as the architect, right? The architect draws up the plans, right, is responsible for developing the plans and drawing them up, and then issuing all of the what's the word? I don't want to say commands, but I mean, you can see that that's kind of what's happening. And, you know, the architect is pointing over and be like, do this, right? It's our responsibility as this architect. We have to step into a position of power by recognizing our talents, our strengths, and our authority to take charge of what? Our own self and our own resonance, right? We're in a very unique position right now. If we're going to cross this threshold, we're going to do it with a sense of sovereignty and openness and a willingness to receive, and to receive the perception, right? To receive the impressions that we are that aren't necessarily, they're not necessarily very obvious right away, right? You need that part of yourself to interpret them as well, right? We do need some measure of filter in order to interpret them, but it's when we're open to receive, we're not living in lack, then we can step into our power as an architect of our own physical reality, okay? Keep this in mind. All of these ones, one, the 10, which is the Wheel of Fortune, which is a 1 and a 0, right? 1, 1, 1. 11, 1 and 1. There is so much new energy and seed point energy along with this reading today that we really need to consider that, especially now that Venus is in Libra. It's time to start applying what we've learned, what we know, to find balance, to achieve balance. And it comes from energy. It's an energetic resonance. So, wow, that was more intense than I anticipated. It's like when I came into this reading today, I was very low energy, and a lot of it has to do with it's just been very overcast. It's been very humid where I'm at, and it's overcast, it's humid where I'm at, the barometric pressure is going down, and so things, oxygen is less available, things have to, your body and your systems have to work a little harder. There's just a lot, weighing down on us. That's definitely happening. So it's, let me plug it in before it dies on us. There we go. All right, guys. There we go. So this is our chart for today, August 16th. Let's see here. All right, guys. So I'm going to move myself over here. This moon in Sagittarius, you can feel in some ways the lift, right? The optimism, feeling optimistic, feeling like, the sky's the limit. The sky's the limit, right? The sky is the limit. And so Jupiter is all, the ruler of Sagittarius, expanding, right? The more that you expand, the more possibilities that enter your field of, experience, the more things that come in for you to respond to interact with. But it's all big picture with Sagittarius, right? So we're feeling the big picture. We're feeling the collective paradigm. We're feeling the truth, right? The beliefs that are really that provide the friction, that create the fire of alchemy. And it's the fire of alchemy that allows us to synthesize. It allows us to understand. See, that's Sagittarius is the higher mind. It is our understanding. Whereas Mercury and Gemini specifically is the empirical knowledge, right? The data that we collect. And then it's when we get to Sagittarius, which is the opposite. It is the synthesis. It is our dissertation. It is pulling it all together to come to an abstraction that is symbolized in things like religion and philosophy and archetypal symbols. All of those things belong in the realm of abstraction. And then our transference, right? That's also how we transfer that's how we transfer all of our experiences. Our energetic resonance is through symbols, right? And words are, and letters are symbols. It's something to consider here. But when the moon is in Sag, then yeah, we're really feeling all of this truth, optimism. There is a lot of good humor. There's a lot of honesty with Sagittarius. Sometimes it can be brutal. And this is something that we're all kind of experiencing within us. But we have to also be realistic of what that means, is that by the time we get to Sagittarius, the power that we come to see in Scorpio becomes utilized to actually create something. And it is the friction that is the spark of the fire, right? The friction of opposition, the friction of the mirrored image of ourself that we are working with, that then allows us to come to a fuller understanding of reality. So we have our moon in Sagittarius. So let's kind of take a look here at what's going on. Let's see here. Let's see. All right, guys. Mercury, by the way, still in conjunction with Alpha Draconis. So the Draco activations are certainly not going anywhere with all of these points crossing over 7 to 8 degrees. 7 to 8 degrees Virgo. So there'll be more, right? Mars already passed it. Now Mercury is in this position, and then once the sun comes into Virgo and crosses this point, it'll be really illuminated and obvious at that point. Right now we're getting all of these different parts of ourselves interacting with this Draco aspect, and that's something that I'm exploring more in writing and written posts. So you can always check out social media in order to get more understanding of at least my conception of that. So the moon in Sag, we already have Venus in Libra. We see that right here, right? Venus is now in Libra. Look at this. The moon is right now also in a conjunction with K2, or the South Node. I mean, it's in an opposition to the North Node. And as you see too, Mercury's just coming off of a T-square with the nodes. That was yesterday, that T-square with the nodes. And so now that the moon is not only meeting K2 in the South Node, it's meeting Antares, and it's also meeting asteroid Juno, all kind of this 7 to 8 to 9 degree area. So there are things there within us. There is a fire burning, and we are really feeling it. And new things are being created at the depths of us that we don't really see on the surface yet, but we know that they are being created. It's like psychic gestation that's happening. And even though it is K2 and the South Node, and it represents where we're coming from, we can utilize that as the momentum. We can utilize that we've been here before. We can recognize that this is our karmic past, that we've been here in this unification, synthesis, alchemy process, and we can take that within us and use it as momentum moving forward. And what is moving forward? Well, it is Rahu, or the North Node, which is focusing, the arousal of those who would revolt against the unbalanced privilege of one side over the other, right? We talked about this in the astrology report that the North Node and Rahu is the head of the dragon, and it can become kind of obsessive of getting here. And even though this is the direction we're being pulled, it doesn't necessarily mean the action in itself is the right action. It's just pulling us in this direction in order for our soul to learn something, to evolve past this point. And the Hyades star seeds, I've talked so much about this, and so I'm not going to keep going into it. You can go back to past videos, or you can go to past posts about it, but something to consider here is, again, the turgor pressure within us is allowing the expression of the water to move through us, to provide the scaffolding and the pressure to hold us upright. But if it's too much, it ruptures the cell. If it's not enough, then we just fold over and we're limp. And so there is something to be said for what this brings up in us, but it's important also to realize that this is not necessarily us in a physical way, it's for our soul to evolve. And so the moon is pulling all of this energy back to K2 and asteroid Juno, right, who does represent the scales, right? She is the wife of Zeus, and so she does represent the natural reconfiguration or the transfiguration in response to something that pulls things out of balance. And betrayal is a big part of this because Juno would respond every time that she was betrayed because they're locked in this form of back and forth. And so whenever Zeus stepped out, which was all the time, she responded in some way. And we have to also be aware of this potential within ourselves and see that it's building within us, right? Something is building at the root of us in a fire that's within us that we're not fully aware of, but we know that things are gestating on a psychic level. And so the moon is bringing this right to our emotional awareness right now. And if we talked about with the Oracle, right? The steam coming from the fissure is the result of the water and the fire under the surface of the earth coming into contact with each other, creating a type of steam. So the fire is the Sagittarian element that's underneath the surface, right? That is turning that water into steam, giving us an opportunity to shift our perspective or to be lifted in some way, to go into a different perspective and get new perception. And so, and what is it about, Antares? Remember, we just talked about this, the sting of the scorpion, right? The medicine that comes from the heart of the scorpion when we have to get down to what power really is and where it comes from. And when we're in relationship of any kind, that there is in fact a form to it and there's power within it. And Juno is representing how we balance it out, right? And how we respond to the lack of balance, how we respond to betrayal, and how we respond to the sting of realizing what is actually, what is really going on under the surface. Okay. So right after this happens, the moon then comes into a square with Mercury, right? You can see it right here, comes into a square with Mercury. And this position, and as it is conjunct now with Juno exactly, and in conjunction with Antares, the square here is that we may want to step up and kind of mitigate this situation in some way, feeling like, especially with Sagittarius, there's a leadership, there is a teaching or a guidance position, right? We are the defender of the collective values, so there's a responsibility to also bring people along with this. The square to Mercury here is the challenge that we each are in a position where we want to express ourselves very uniquely, right? In our minds, in our expression, in our communication, in the way we conceptualize reality. It is part of the Virgo archetype is finding who we really are and expressing ourselves without any kind of overlay, cultural or traditional overlay. And so Mercury here, as the magician, is giving us this opportunity to really just put ourselves on the canvas exactly how we are, rather than something, boxing it in. But the square here is that we feel kind of responsible. We feel like we need to step in and lead people along the way. And part of it is because we're feeling very intimately the sting of of what it means to give our power away, what it means to consent to situations that create systems that are actually very destructive to most of the people involved, right? We feel responsible. We feel like we want to lead people who are less evolved, right? because it hurts us, and we see and we feel the sting, and so we want to do something about it, and we feel that way. But Mercury, as the magician, is just like, no, put yourself on the canvas. Neither of these are right or wrong. It's just the dynamic with them is going to cause some friction, as we see here, and especially because Juno is involved with Antares, we're really going to feel like we should step up and lead people up this staircase that because they're not capable of doing it themselves. And I would really caution not to fall into one side or the other, but to lean into how uncomfortable this is and see where it takes you. Because remember that Mercury is at home in Virgo. Very strong here. Also, that Mercury rules Gemini as well. And so keeping an eye on these things and where we are going is really, I think, important. So you don't get pulled into a very transient feeling, right? The moon is transient. It's just going to move past this and create experiences for us to feel things. And that's something that we should really consider as we are moving through the day. Moon comes into a sextile now with, as we see here, a sextile with Saturn retrograde. And again, it's still in conjunction with Antares at this point. And there's a lot of, there's a dramatization here in Sagittarius with what we could achieve if we're ambitious, right? What society tells us we can be, right? It's theatrical. It's a representation of all of this opportunity. It's not real. It's just the big picture of it, right? Sagittarius, the big picture. Look what we can do. Look where we can go. Look what we can achieve together. It's all, it's theatrical. It's a representation. It's not actually the real thing, and this motivates us, right? This is important to consider, that this does, in fact, motivate us in its own pure way in Sagittarius. And the way that we can really invest this energy is applying it to where Saturn is, right? Saturn retrograde in Aquarius, that is showing us how we use other people, how we see other people as archetypes, and every kind of person, right? All of the most evil people that we acknowledge in our society, for instance, they themselves too are screens that we project all of our fear and hate and hopelessness and judgment. All of that stuff is getting projected even onto those people. And this is some of the hardest work, right? And Saturn retrograde here is making it, it's that tough love that it's that tough love that we don't really want, because we just want to feel good. And so we can take this moment here, even though we can see here like, oh, I see the opportunity and the greatness that I can apply to maybe treating people as actual human beings, right? The other way to look at this is that we continue to ignore the fact that we're doing this, and then all it does, this moon in Sagittarius, all it does is inflame it more, right? It just gives it more of that energy of like, hey, when I continue to project all of my stuff onto these figureheads out in society, or even in my own life, right? It's your fault that I feel this way, right? When really we're just projecting all of our own inner demons onto other people. If it could go either way. You choose how you want to invest this energy, because Saturn is unmoving, right? Saturn is unmoving, and it's inside of us. It's the retrograde. It's a lot more obvious at this moment. And so we really need to take this opportunity right now with Saturn retrograde to do this work within us, to really acknowledge it, to understand how what this does to us in terms of form, right? There's this, Saturn is our form. It's our scaffolding. It's the bones, right? And it provides the support structure. So, and the actual institutions of reality, right? Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius. It is the co-ruler of Aquarius. So it's still very powerful here. So how do you want to invest your energy, right? We can see all the representations of opportunity to actually do some real work on ourselves and to actually see each other as human beings, or we can invest we can just ignore that, continue to project out onto other people as if they are screens for our own projections, and at that point, how we feel about this representation is going to be, we can invest this dramatized version of greatness onto this situation. And I just, it's Saturn is Saturn, and when Saturn goes direct, then it's like right now it's still a little bit amorphous because it's retrograde, right? It looks like it's going backwards. It's not really, because it's a function of perspective. There it is, a function of perspective. Are we interpreting it correctly or not? This moon in Sagittarius is really it really depends. It really does depend what paradigm system we're operating under and how we invest that into this work with Saturn. I think that's varied right there, and that has a lot to do with perception and interpretation. Then Mercury comes into a square, right, with asteroid Juno, exactly. So we can focus on feeling responsible for leading people to a certain conclusion or leading people up the mountain when we don't think that they're evolved enough to do it themselves, as if we are the mother and their children. And I will say that Scorpio is a very feminine, maternal, matriarchal symbol, and the heart of the Scorpion, it gets right to it. But again, Mercury is in its home territory here of Virgo, in this square, again, with Juno. It's like our magician quality here can really be focused and expressed as a function of our own self, our individuality, putting ourselves on the canvas, as opposed to taking out of a feeling of wanting to find balance, trying to lead people to a certain conclusion about belief systems. So that has been, this is, as far as I can tell, this is, we want people to be awake, but at the same, because again, we think that their waking up is going to then be how we feel better about what's going on, and it's not going to work that way. And so we have to take into account, when Mercury is in a square to Juno today, what is it that is inspiring us to lead people? Is it because we feel hurt and betrayed and we're afraid and we want balance in those types of relationships? Or are we going to allow that part of ourselves that does consciously manifest to just be itself? Right? To just be ourselves, to express ourselves fully without any mitigating factor. The moon is going to then square Mars. There's a lot of mutable squares today because there's a lot of Virgo energy, and the moon is in Sagittarius. So the moon now is going to square Mars in Virgo. And this is, let's see here. Mars is in a position to be very penetrating, and that's what Mars does, right? The thrusting forward of ourselves, right? The warrior energy, the action, the ambition, the drive to be and to actualize ourselves and to fight something, right? Warrior, Mars is the god of war. Now he's in a position, Mars, as a function of this masculine principle, this cardinal fire, right? Reaching out. Is in a place in Virgo where the penetration, it gets down very deeply and is able to pull the veil away so that things are seen very clearly for what they are, especially when it's pulling the veil away from our creative space within us, right? The dream visualization that is the feminine archetype, the spider, for instance. The Mars as a warrior is able to step up and pull that away, snatch it away almost. It's a little bit uncomfortable, but Mars is not afraid. He's just like, pull the Band-Aid off, right? Just jump in, just snatch the veil away and see it for what it really is. Now the moon in a square to Mars today, again, this mutable square with Sagittarius, is that we are trying to bring, we're trying to promote this new age, right? This spiritualization and promotion of these symbols that represent where we're going, right? The flag turns into the eagle turns into a rooster saluting the dawn, right? It's very mutable and it's very changeable and malleable, but it does represent this higher ideal that Sagittarius represents. And so while we feel this strong urge to like mutate in some ways, right, to promote these symbols, right? Like, look at what we can be, look at what we can become, look at how these things represent where we're going, right? We feel this, but again, square to Mars is just like, I'm pulling the veil away off of what's inside of me, right? In the masculine part of ourselves in Virgo is pulling the veil away, and we get to see exactly what's under the surface. What is the space in our subconscious that is actually responsible and has the resonance for what we're creating? And this is really important today, because as the moon moves through Sagittarius and we become more and more invested in terms of how we feel into these larger pictures, these collective belief systems, the paradigm that Sagittarius represents, for all of the, like I said, for all of the optimism and honesty and pure joy that comes out of Sagittarius, there's a judgment, and there is a sense that the understanding kind of trumps everything. And so Mars being Mars is just like, I'm snatching away the veil. I need to see exactly the face of the darkness within myself so that I know what is going to be brought forward when it's time to come into Libra. So this is going to be, again, kind of a difficult place. This is tonight at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Mercury then comes into a quincunx with Saturn right here. Look at that quincunx, right? That inconjunct, those things are inconjunct. And again, this happened with Mars, all right? So this is not new. It's just now it's going to be in the realm of the mind, the analysis that Mercury and Virgo represents, the intuition and analysis, just like the Oracle, right? The intuition that allows for the perception, the interpretation that's a result of the analysis. Mercury, in its ability to be non-binary and to live in the duality but not be of it, right, is in this position in Virgo now that it's the two heads looking out and beyond the shadows. How do you live in the duality but not be in the duality, right? Mercury is going to provide us this opportunity to conceptualize reality this way. Again, the quincunx to Saturn has, there's that inconjunct again, that we want to be able to look out past the duality, and look out beyond that. But at the same time, the reality check that Saturn is that we have to acknowledge how we internally are projecting everything inside of us out onto these archetypes in our society, in our life, right? In our awareness, and how we really need to actually, how can we stop doing that and actually treat and acknowledge people as human beings, sovereign, individual human beings that are just as much a child of God as us, right? Instead of treating them as our own personal screen for our projections. Now, the reason this quincunx is so important is because we can, in our minds, kind of bypass this really hard work by looking out beyond the duality. And I'm not saying that one side is better. It's just that the inconjunct here means that they don't fit together, and we're going to have to adjust ourselves in this moment so that we can alchemize this process, right? That we can adjust and come out of it in a different place entirely. So also some difficult, but ultimately very important work to be done today. So the moon is still in Sagittarius now, and it's coming into a trine with Chiron, and at the very same time is in a sextile to Vesta. Now remember, Vesta was in direct opposition to Chiron over the weekend. We can go from a place of imagining what can be, right? The imaginative play that goes into seeing where we could go, like the perfect form by imagining it. There goes that ladybug again, right? We have to actually imagine and live in the resonance of what we want to create as if it already exists. The problem here with Chiron in this point of Aries that has been plaguing us is that we have really been frustrated with the fact that it has not transformed within us right away, right? We want that bomb to explode and it's not going to. And the frustration that comes along with it is triggering all of these wounds so much with Chiron. And so the moon is in a trine, a fire trine with Chiron in this moment, and at the very same time is in a sextile with Vesta. So this trine means we don't have to really do much, does it? They are functionally supportive of each other. It's a foundation. It's gaining a lot of traction with each other. The sextile with Vesta in Libra is requires us to invest something. We have to actually engage in the process of imagining, right? Now, this degree is no joke. This is retribution. This is the fact that the new cycle that we are creating, whatever it is, will carry the karma of the past if we do not acknowledge it, right? It will come into the situation. Now, when we come to feel this, become aware of it, have an internalized experience of it with the moon in Sagittarius, if we do nothing, it will, in fact, it will trigger all of this. Won't it? It will trigger this Chiron in Aries. It'll trigger the Aries. It'll trigger the feeling of frustration. It'll trigger the feeling of wanting things to change right away when ultimately that's not how it works. We hold the seed point, right? All of the potential for who we could become is in Aries, but it's not until we get to Libra in its opposition that it actually finds a definitive form, right? So this retribution is no joke, right? This is no joke. And like I said, we can do nothing and it'll just trigger all of this. It'll trigger all of it. We want things to happen now, don't we? We don't have any patience, and Chiron is doing us no favors in this realm, except showing, especially retrograde, except showing us exactly where our frustration is and what we can work on. The sextile to Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, the flame that sustains us as our soul and our spark. She's in Libra now. She represents the actual form of balance now, and there are many Sabian symbols in Libra that represent the fire at the center, right? That is this like balancing force. Now, this moon, if we apply this energy of retribution, and it's really not retribution as much as acknowledging that any unresolved karma from these last cycles will come back, right? Just like if you want to make gold out of lead, if you have impurities in your alchemical process, you're not going to get a pure outcome. You have to actually purify the two aspects if you want something new and beautiful and pure to be created. And so when we invest this energy of retribution, right, the acknowledging that the past will in fact impact the new cycle if it's unresolved, if we invest this into where Vesta is and be able to imagine the perfect form, be able to engage in some sort of play, right? To imagine, to be kind of childlike in that way of just like letting the pretension go a little bit and realize that the spark within us that sustains us is coming from our ability to imagine where we could go, right? The thing about the scales of balance is that you know where the other side is when one side is in a certain position. Just like where Sagittarius is, we feel it very intimately, very personally, where things are situated. We can apply this to where Vesta is in Libra, and we can actually use this as our power of manifestation, to be able to imagine where we're going, to be able to see it very innocently and know that that is what is sustaining us in the face of something very challenging, I think, and having to deal with the reality of the unresolved karma from the past situation, right? It's a widow, standing at an open grave. It's like, yes, this is a widow. This person's husband has died. But just because that's happened doesn't mean that the karma of all of her past actions isn't going to follow her into her next cycle of life, right? And again, we do nothing about it and we get triggered. And that's okay. That's just what it is. If that's where we need to be, that's where we need to be. If we want to invest this energy both ways, this has a lot more impact and the ability to really enjoy the fruits of that harmonization and that reconciliation that the sextile and the 6 and the 60-degree angle actually represent. So not easy work to do today. And like I said, with the moon in Sagittarius, it's really not doing us any favors in terms of self-righteousness and the power of a collective belief system. But there are ways to utilize this. There's ways to transmute this energy. And the square with the sun yesterday, the moon and the sun squaring each other yesterday, was that moment where we could actually connect into that part of ourselves that realizes that we can transubstantiate those animal drives into something actually powerful. And when we come together, the power that we create when we come together as conscious, completely devotional beings, unconditional love, right, is infinite, right? What we can create together is amazing, but it only comes from an awareness of this. And if we allow that energy, that lust, and that drive to move through us and fulfill self-preservation, ego, all of those other things that are, and the narcissism that comes along with a really inverted Leo energy is just as strong right now. And it's important that we realize that as we embark on this day. So guys, I'm going to leave it there. That's plenty to work with for today. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. I will do my best to be consistent throughout the week, but I am going on retreat, so I feel like I do need to step away and give myself some attention and some energy. But the full moon is coming, and this is a huge cycle of completion with this Aquarius full moon at the last degree of Aquarius, and the sun then moving into Virgo. So I think it is important that we are addressing it together, and I'm at least offering what's coming through my interpretation, and certainly coming through my perception, because I guess some people find it valuable. I find it valuable just to be able to have a voice. So if it helps other people, that's even better. So if you're looking for energetic support, or if you are looking for Reiki, I've been getting lots of really incredible feedback lately about the distance work. And if you are interested in a reading of any kind, you can go to catalystenergies.net. It's in the description box below. And you can also connect on social media if you're interested in any of the written posts that I'm doing. There's just so much content that is moving through me these days that there's a lot of different platforms to be participating in, I guess. So you can go to my website, you can go to social media to stay connected. You can get on my mailing list that's really the main way that I communicate when there are updates in my services, when I'm making special offers. It comes through my email list. So that's an important thing to get involved with. I don't spam people on a regular basis. It really does actually just allow me to reach people when I'm like, hey, I'm offering this new service, or hey, I'm offering a discount on this, or hey, I'm going to be offering this particular show on a new platform. That's going to come through the email list. So anyway, that's plenty of information, guys. Thank you for sticking with me. I will see you tomorrow morning. I'm not sure when it's going to be, but I will be on tomorrow morning with Tuesday's Daily Medicine transmission. Have a wonderful day, guys. Take very good care of yourselves, and I'll see you tomorrow.